we're very pleased to welcome Deborah Moe, who is presently Director of Public Relations and Social Media at the Boston Ballet. But prior to that, she worked for 13 years for Marc Jacobs as Director of E-commerce and Retail. So she's going to tell you about both of her jobs, explaining more about how she got to those jobs also. Welcome.
Hi there. Sure you can hear me. Thank you for having me today. Can you all hear me in the back okay? Yeah. I was explaining I'm used to giving business presentations that are usually about 10 minutes or less and usually have kind of a small group of people, so bear with me today, and I try not to put too many charts and graphs in my presentation, but it will be relevant. So my goal is to teach you a little bit today about the brand experience and what it looks like behind the scenes as brands are trying to make the most out of both their e-commerce sites, content marketing, and social media. As you mentioned, I'm currently at the Boston Ballet, but I was Director of Retail and E-commerce for Marc Jacobs for about 5 years of my time there. I actually started as Executive Assistant to Marc and Robert, so I was doing quite a bit of traveling around the world with them. I got the job actually by answering a classified in Women's Wear Daily. So I'm going to give you a plug at the end for all the great sources for you to follow, but Women's Wear Daily is one that I, to this day, still kind of live by. So all of my digital education has been hands-on, and if you back the timeline up, and I'll give out my age, but I actually started working in New York in about the year 2000, so a lot has changed between then and now. I wasn't formally educated in the digital realm at all. It actually all came from really pure hands-on experience and navigating with a designer and a brand president how they wanted to be represented online and kind of testing the waters. And there are certain things that are happening today that we never would have dreamed of 13 years ago, but they're quite expected of a brand now. So working for Marc and Robert as executive assistant, we traveled all over the world, opened stores in countries like Russia and Brazil. This is actually a photo of me outside of the Athens store. I'm not the blonde in the heels inside, I'm the one on the phone in the sneakers on the outside of the store. So working hard. And after a little while, they gave me more responsibility and asked me to take on the retail network, which expanded to about 25 stores nationally before I took on the role of e-commerce manager. So here's how I got there. There are 3 things. They may seem really simple, but I wanted to share them for the sake of sharing them. The fashion industry takes a ton of hard work, attention to detail, and great communication skills. Communication piece in particular. So here's my little graphic. Regardless of if you're buying trim, or you're working in digital, or if you're dressing a celebrity, or if you're planning an event in Cairo, which I actually had to do. That's Robert Duffy on a camel, and that was something we planned in a couple of days while on the road. But clear communication. You need to be able to express yourself not only in email form, but verbally and with a group. It's one thing that will come up again and again, and it's not just about what's online. But at this time, we're now about 2005, Marc Jacobs was actually behind the game in terms of having an e-commerce site. They had a website, it was lookbooks, brands, product representation, but nothing for sale. So we'll start today with how we got e-commerce up and running, and we'll talk a little bit about how that evolved into content marketing and then social media. We'll talk about what it takes to get a big brand, big well-known brand like Marc Jacobs online. And then just to point out, there's something that I won't be covering today, but is sort of the other prong of an online presence, and that's paid media, search engine marketing, paid online presence, digital marketing. All of that is something that I won't cover. I'm going to stick to basically the e-commerce piece and then the 2 unpaid pieces, which are the content marketing and social media. So e-commerce. First graph, and again, I promise I won't have too many. But just to give a little bit of background, e-commerce business is booming. I'm sure this is no surprise to all of you. In the US, sales in 2013 were $262 billion, and that's expected to increase 11% to $291 billion this year, and this is according to Forrester, a technology and market research firm. The growth of e-commerce, which already accounts for about 8% of total retail sales in the US, is expected to outpace sales growth at at brick and mortar stores. To me, I'm not sure if this is something you're familiar with, but this controversy is something that retailers have been struggling with all along. Is e-commerce going to rob our standalone stores from their business? And I gave you a lot of background on that because that explains some of the hesitancy in putting a lot of product online initially, which to us these days seems silly. You should have more online on your brand's website than you would in the store. That seems intuitive, but at the time, it was a big decision. So by 2017, we're expecting to reach $370 billion worth of sales in the US, a full tenth of all retail. Then if you think about that, that's still only 10% of all retail sales in the US. So the larger piece of the business is still happening in stores. This graphic really just shows us that the rate of growth online is faster than the rate of growth in stores. Still scary, but 10% versus 90% that's still happening physically in person. So what's driving the growth online? Forrester cites two factors, smartphones and tablets. They're boosting the amount of time users are spending online. No surprise there. But it means leisure hours, weekends, commuting hours. I actually commute to Boston from Rhode Island every day, and I'll tell you that's where I usually do most of my damage shopping online, is on the train on my phone. More than half of US online consumers have smartphones now, which actually seems low. And they not only use them to make the purchases, but also to research purchases, to find out more information about the brand and the products before they actually make a purchase. And they are making more purchases because now most websites are mobile optimized. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. A second factor is that retailers are contributing more investment into their online sales divisions. That investment is good news for all of us because that means more jobs in the fashion industry, more jobs specifically working on e-commerce sites. So going back to retail sales by channel and that 10% I was mentioning, it's no longer looking like retail sales will diminish in stores, and we're looking at strategies of how to align and strengthen each channel by using each other to help each other. So this illustration shows a proportion of online sales being the dark blue at the bottom, online influence sales that are actually purchased in the store is that middle blue color. So that means I looked at something on my phone and then I went into the store and bought it. And then the light blue is actually sales that had nothing to do with being online. Someone walked into a store and made an impulse buy or made a buy based on something they tried on. But the key finding here is that an online presence can actually strengthen your in-store sales. As I said before, no longer worrying about are online purchases going to detract from my retail business? No, actually they're going to strengthen it. Can I see a show of hands of how many of you have actually looked at something online and then waited and gone to the store and bought it? Pretty much everyone, all right. And it used to be thought this was something more common with household appliances, things like that, but we're finding more and more that it's fashion as well. And you might be looking at those products not only on marcjacobs.com, you might be looking at them on vogue.com or Harper's, and then waiting until you walk into a store and purchase it there. So just one little touch point to add in terms of integrating retail and online sales, brands spend a lot of time actually making sure they get you to the stores because we're lucky on the East Coast, Providence, Boston, that those stores, especially fashion brands, are fairly available to us, but there's this whole other part of the country that you can actually see that, as I call the flyover states in the middle of the US who don't have stores. So brands spend a lot of time. Marc Jacobs actually has a whole section where they also show their multi-brand doors where you can actually find the store easily and find some fun information. And then they're working more and more on integrating social media there, like Foursquare, so that you have incentive to go into the store and have fun with it before you make a purchase. Another big strategy that crosses over from store to online is email capture. I'm sure most of you, any shopping you do, you're asked for an email address at checkout. It's also a main goal, we call it lead generation, on websites. This is true in the arts industry as well. The more email capture, the better we can communicate to our brands. And that direct marketing is just as valuable, if not more so, than actually our social media following. Okay, hold on, let me catch my breath before I get into creating the website. This is what's currently on the Marc site. but I actually love it because it kind of reminds me of how we felt after we got the site up and running. Maybe not that glamorous, but that's how we felt. As you've heard from former speakers, I believe, that there are lots of options for young designers, new brands, things like Etsy, where you can sell your products online without having to build your own site. There are also vendors that sort of, I'll call them off-the-rack platforms, where everything is built for you, like a server called Magento. And you actually just have to populate your items into that site, and it's sort of a pre-packaged piece of software. It's a content management system, or CMS. But a brand like Marc Jacobs is going to build a site from scratch. I'm going to walk you through that process a little bit. It takes about 3 months to determine what the main objectives are and to choose a vendor, or create an RFP, a request for proposal, from different web vendors. And then you get a whole group of people in the room, from your designer to your executive director, to those of us who are going to be working on the site, to decide what the user experience is going to be. How will the customer navigate the product? Will be left navigation, top navigation, drop-downs. This structure is called the wireframes, and we spend quite a bit of time working on figuring out what the wireframes will be for the site. Then you have meeting after meeting on the business rules. What will the shipping fees be? Returns policy? Are our systems integrated so that we can return to store, et cetera, et cetera? I'm sure most of you at this point have had lots of experiences of J.Crew, you can return and get a credit right there in the store. Other brands, it's completely separate. Marc is actually still completely separate to this day. Their systems aren't integrated or advanced enough to be able to manage that customer experience. So all of this has to be determined so that the functions can be built into the site. What happened to most brands, including Marc, is that you build a site and user behavior and expectations from the customers change, and in 2 to 3 years you're building a site a second time. And also we're discovering, as search engines become more and more sophisticated, how do we build search engine optimization into the site? And I'm not going to go into specific technical specifications for that, but there are a lot of things that lead into that, aside from what's actually on your physical site, to what you're doing in content marketing that will lead people back. The other piece is building a mobile optimization, like I mentioned before. In the beginning, your app or your mobile experience was completely different from your site, and now best practice is that it's a native optimization. So when you actually build a site, you're building it so that it drags and scales to proportion for a phone, rather than having sort of 2 content management systems that you have to use to organize the products on one or the other. They're now just kind of pulling one into the other. Lots of things. Translation sites. Marc is all over the world. It took us a while to make sure we had a Japanese site. We're owned by a French company. We still don't have a French translation site. All of these things take a lot of investment and a lot of time. And I'd say if e-commerce is the field you're interested in, really playing around on just about every shopping site and examining the different user experiences you have on those sites is a great start. You're already so much further ahead than I was in 2005 when we were initially building the site, because of all of the best practices that are out there and in the market already. So that was the 3-month process, and I'd say that's the minimum end of that. Then it's 12 to 18 months to actually build the site, working hand in hand with that vendor that you selected, which is generally made up of a web development team and then designers specifically for the site. And you're looking at a minimum of a $500,000 investment per brand, and that's just to build the site. That doesn't have to do with any of the other things we're about to talk about. Then you choose a distribution center. How is your product going to get to your customers? It's most likely not the same distribution center that you have for your retail stores. It's probably one that is set up specifically for e-commerce. It could be the same, depends on how sophisticated at Marc it's separate. The other thing we set up in conjunction with the new website was a customer call service, customer call center. We didn't have anything like that. We had our retail stores and we had a retail director, me, who got all the complaints on my voicemail. We actually set up a call center down in Kentucky. And then worked quite a bit with the brand representatives, some of them working in the wholesale division, to come down and train all of the call center employees on our products. So quite a bit of work involved there. And then you come to the exciting piece, filling the new site with your product and with all of your content. I'm going to walk you through this. If this hasn't been tedious already, it's about to get a little bit more tedious, but My aim is to show you sort of all of the pieces that go into building a site that maybe we take for granted, and how they actually provide lots of different opportunities for those of us in the fashion industry who'd like to get involved with the brand and are looking for great job openings. So, buy the products. That's probably pretty intuitive. You have your buying department. Then you need to photograph the products. This can happen at the sample level in some cases, but sometimes brands can only afford to make a sample in 2 colors, and the product is offered in 5 colors. Then you have a challenge. You either color correct, or you wait and pull some samples off the production line further down the process. This makes everyone on the other end nervous because you have much less time to get those photos taken, corrected, and into the system. Photo editing is a big piece. We hired about 6 different freelancers in the end to help just do all of the post-production editing on our photos. We had an in-house photographer at the time. And then we're adding metadata to even just the photographs so that we can basically track back to our buy, add the SKU number, season, all of the different data that's important to make sure we can tell what products have been photographed, systemized. That was in its own separate sort of content management system just for the photography. And then upload into the content management system for the website. This took a team from our IT department to actually take a master spreadsheet that then was data loaded kind of from the back end into our content management system. Still going. Then we organize the products within that content management system, or CMS. And that's basically the merchandising. So that's where you are putting product groups together, not only in folders based purely on season and pants, tops, sweaters, dresses, but also organizing them in folders by looks or by color schemes, things that might have to do with direction of an ad. Let's say it's Valentine's Day and you're doing really beautiful reds and oranges and things that will inspire people to buy during that holiday. And then there's all of the copywriting that goes into writing the descriptions. We didn't have a copywriter when we launched, so I spent about 4 nights up all night actually writing product descriptions on every single item that went on the Marc Jacobs site. And then you need to upload size guides, measurements, drop length for handbags, things like that. All of that, these things that again, we were not prepared for and had to do a lot of sort of scrambling at the time. These are now full-time positions for people at fashion brands. And then populating cross-sell. Most websites now will have an algorithm that will actually pull based on certain rules that you request, but it can also be done manually. So on a site like Amazon, it's all automated and suggested for you is based on all of your user behavior. But on a site like Marc Jacobs, there's actually someone, if you look at a black dress, they're going to actually pop into a folder, not in the moment, ahead of time. Sounds like someone's right there, you know. But they're actually going to pop in a black handbag, a black shoe, and some other accessories to sort of cross-sell with your dress, just like they would in a store. And then you move everything over from what is a testing environment to the publish side. So you hold your breath. With any luck, the products will arrive at the warehouse that you chose, and the receipt of those products into the system at the warehouse actually triggers them to pop up on your website. So we had issues where we knew a shipment had arrived, but we weren't seeing the shipment of watches actually in the content management. They were in the content management system, they were at the warehouse, but they weren't populating on the site. So that was a call to our developer to figure out what kind of bugs were happening there. So they've arrived, products are on your site, but you're not done. You need to monitor your stock level and your sales. Based on those findings, you re-merchandise to try to create more sales, and you reorder if things are selling well. There's also managing the distribution center and the KPIs, the key performance indicators. How quickly are they processing orders? How correct are those orders? How fast are customers receiving them? Manage that relationship with the call center. We do some nesting, listening in on calls to see how they are handling customer requests. And then managing offers, promotions, incentives, all of that online marketing. There's your e-commerce team. Believe it or not, we launched the Marc site with 4 people plus our IT team. But it's not realistic, and I assure you there's a full team in place now. But here are some of the jobs that I can list that are related to working in the e-commerce industry. So you have buyer, merchandiser, photographer, stylist, post-production editor, copywriter, content manager, operations manager, customer relations, product training, web analytics, and then your web-based marketing and promotions.